You're listening to Funny Peculiar with Jeff Downs.
So, welcome to another episode of the Funny Peculiar podcast. And this week, my special guest is Dave Morgan, who is a poet. Well, not just a poet, because we were chatting. He's a writer, he's an organiser. He's based in Bolton. So, hello, Dave Morgan.
Hello, Jeff. Hi. Pleased to be here.
How are you doing? You all right?
Very well, thank you.
Now, Tony Walsh has been massive in the Northwest. Yeah. He's blossomed. Now, you knew Tony as well, didn't you? From when you sort of started to get into it.
Yeah,
What's your connection there? How did you get to know Tony?
I'll try and package it succinctly, but in 2002, I think it was Julian Jordan and myself set up Write Out Loud in Bolton on the back of another poetry in pubs regular event. We didn't want to usurp it, but we actually supported a feminist split off from it.
Okay.
The women wanted a women's night.
Right.
But we decided to go along because to boost the numbers.
Yeah.
Then they were and then they stopped organising it, so they asked us if we would organise it.
Yeah.
So we ended up with two of these poetry events, one which we picked up by default. So that's how we started with Write Out Loud. And when we were doing that for 2 or 3 years, and I managed to end up working in Langworthy in Salford, managing the Cornerstone, which is a community health centre, community wellbeing centre, brand new centre. And Tony was the Mr. Big in Langworthy because he was the regeneration manager for a big Salford Council kind of and health service and everything else. Single regeneration project, big project.
Yeah.
So we're on the same corridor. So but just by chance, I don't know how it came out, but he said he was performing at the Britain's Protection. He showed me something he'd just written for North Manchester Hospital's centenary. Even then I thought that's very good.
And just to hold you there, Britain's Protection, now that is a pub in Manchester, and that's quite a big famous pub, isn't it?
It's a very famous, very old and pretty well unchanged pub.
Yeah.
It's a good pub to go for a genuine feel of what 19th century pubs were like,
Yeah, because it's pretty much a grade listed building, you can't touch it, and it is as it is, as you say. It's
the upstairs room, there used to be a poetry night run by Connor Elwood.
Connor Elwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Tony took us and he said, meet you there, come along, do something. I was terrified.
And you'd never actually performed poetry at that point. You'd written.
Well, we'd done stuff through Write Out Loud, which is reading in and around in a pub, in an atmosphere actually generated to be supportive.
And Write Out Loud, that was its concept, was it, to help people?
Absolutely. We didn't care whether people felt they were any good or not good or didn't know, whatever. It was just getting through that barrier of getting your stuff out. It was very therapeutic. Really.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who had poetry inside them came to Write Out Loud and got it out. And that was the point of it. In the round, rather than standing up. No microphones, anything like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas going to Britain's Protection was a bit different. Upstairs room, a lot of people already practiced, if you like, performance up on the stage, mic, outside our comfort zone.
Yeah.
Terrified, knees trembling, all the rest of it.
Yeah, sure.
But we had a go. But we didn't have much, talking personally, didn't have any stagecraft or anything like that.
Yeah.
But from there, anyway, me and Tony worked together for 2 or 3 years and we just did a lot together, a lot of daytime work together.
Yeah.
But we got to know a lot of gigs.
Yeah.
It led to when Write Out Loud set up its website. One of the first things it did was a gig guide.
Okay.
And now it's got probably the most comprehensive gig guide anywhere because it's got American gigs in, Australian gigs in.
Wow.
I mean, it has just got the comprehensive performance poetry gig guide and some other, not some performance, more traditional kind of writing groups and poetry in the round and that sort of thing. So that's quite a strong pillar, if you like, of current non-academic performance world.
Right.
And well worth visiting. I'd sort of drifted away from Write Out Loud.
So let's just give that a plug as well. So it's Write Out Loud.
Yeah.
So for anybody that wants to follow you as well, you're on Facebook.
Yes.
And people will. So Dave Moore, you can check Dave out on Facebook. I'll put this on the bio as well when it goes out. So Write Out Loud, is that writeoutloud.com or .co.uk?
Writeoutloud.org.
.org, right? So it's writeoutloud.org.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it'll be.
Yeah.
I'll put it all in the bio, so we'll check it all. So if anybody's interested in poetry or finding out if there's an event near them, they can go to the website, and there's quite a comprehensive list, as you say.
It has everything:
Up and down the
reviews,
UK.
competitions.
Right.
The actual gig guide is international now.
Right,
It's just
okay.
been taken up by so many writing groups around the world and venues.
So people have so this has kind of been a catalyst for. For
Yes, it all started in the Man and Scythe in Bolton. Originally.
and the Manor Side.
The Man and Scythe is Bolton's oldest pub.
Right. Okay. And how old is that? When we
It
say.
claims to be about 1431 or something.
Right, that's quite old.
It's been remodelled at various times,
really,
like
it's that
1540,
old? Yeah.
1660. But anyway, it is Bolton's oldest pub. It's called the Cider House,
Okay.
for obvious reasons, and it's one of the last bastions of old Bolton. Really. But in the front room there, a guy called John Jelly, who
John Jelly.
Jelly was a busker,
Right.
who'd been in a band called the Jellyheads,
Right.
and he was a character. He was from Brixton.
Right. Okay. Brixton, London.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was a complete character, and
he would just play one-man bands.
He could play, and he played in the arcade at Newport Arcade, and he just banged through 30 tunes in an hour.
Right.
sort of
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then go and spend it in the pub.
Yeah.
He was a lovely fella, John, and his approach was, come in, there's maybe 12 of you sitting around. Have you got a poem? No. Well, there's a box of books there. He got a big box brought down from upstairs, and it was full of poetry books.
Right.
Have a delve. Some of which have been lifted from various places.
Right.
They've been acquired through diverse means.
Socialism.
And they were from old Victorian type things right up to contemporary things. But you could bring your own. There's no. And he had a ball, and he said, "Right, who's going to start?" And you read your poem, and you chucked the ball to somebody else.
Wow, okay.
And then they picked it up, and they could either read their own or something they'd spotted in a book. Very informal, very relaxed, very supportive. And John was it was a bit of a mission for him. He was good at it.
Yeah.
He wasn't that bothered about the poetry as poetry.
Yeah.
He was interested in people doing something that they needed to do.
Yeah.
People would stagger in from the bar, stand in the corner, recite something from childhood,
Right.
and crash out again.
Right.
We were separated from the bar by a wicker screen, which kind of suppressed none of the noise
Yeah.
or the jukebox or anything. But none of that mattered. It started to attract people like Tony Kinsella,
Yeah.
Gordon Zola,
Yeah.
and Tony would come over and things like that when I first. I think they'd finished there by the time I met Tony. But a lot of people came in because it started to build a name. There weren't that many venues then.
Yeah.
It was Sunday night, and it was quite a good venue. Anyway, that's where we started. And when I bumped into Tony at the Cornerstone, 2004 to 2006, he revealed this world that he was already mining, if you like, and all around the northwest. So go up to the Yorkshire House, to Spotlight, or down to Liverpool for Dead Good Poets. So the very first place me and Julian went to see when we branched out and set up our own night, we went to Dead Good Poets in Liverpool.
Yeah.
They've been going for years and
Yeah.
years, right back to the 70s and 80s. And they had a good pedigree of, obviously, Liverpool poets.
Yeah.
And they had a style.
And we're talking Liverpool poets here because I think Roger McGough is one of the big ones. Is it John Henry?
Adrian Henry, Roger McGough, and Brian Patton.
These were a trio, weren't they?
And they're probably the most successful British poets of all time. Possibly, I say that slightly tongue in cheek, but they're booked. The Mersey Sound,
right?
Penguin Special number, whatever it was, just sold and still sells and still sells.
Yeah.
And it was written in the late 60s.
Yeah.
So that tradition, Dead Good Poets, we thought would be a good benchmark for what we did, and we went along and we came out of thinking, well, there's some real professionals here and there's some very good performers and there's something to aspire to.
Yeah.
But there are others who we think we can hold our own.
Yeah.
We were writing a mixture of crowd-pleasing amusing things, or what we thought were amusing.
And what was your style? What did you find you were writing?
Well, it was this mixture between this kind of I never thought of a label before, Jeff, but it was observations on life, I suppose, and we mixed it with some very sincere but probably naive personal stuff. In both Julie and my case, we were doing a lot of exploring about our relationship with our fathers.
Okay.
And it had a massive effect on both of us.
Yeah.
We got through an awful lot of stuff through writing stuff that was directly or indirectly related to our fathers.
And do you think? And so, in a way, for a lot of people, poetry is quite.
That's what I see myself doing, telling a very short story.
Yeah.
I can't be bothered writing a long story.
Right.
And using some poetic machinery, if you like, tricks and so on, to condense it and make it more listenable too.
But you write short stories as well.
I do, yes.
So
yes,
this
yeah,
is.
yeah.
But so we'll talk about, because I want to know about that more, because that interests me again. Because Alexi Sale's a short story writer, and that's again another sort of hidden, forgotten about format. Yeah. But let's go back when you were talking sort of late 70s, early 80s, that you were tentatively starting to write your first poems.
Oh yeah.
And how did that come about? What was the sort of, why did you think, right, I'm going to just start writing?
Well, I had the same experience of poetry as you did at school.
Right.
And I didn't get beyond O levels as they were then.
Yeah.
And I hated. I remember at the age of 5 I was reading an anthology of poetry.
Right.
Picking the poems out that I liked.
Yeah.
Because although we were very working class home, we had books.
Yeah.
And one of them was a poetry book.
And where are you originally from?
Stoke.
You're
from
Stoke.
Stoke-on-Trent,
Right.
yeah,
Okay. So the potteries. That.
Yeah. So we lived in a terraced street, and I was a manual worker and all that sort of stuff. But we did have books. They believed in books, and so even as a small kid, I picked out the ones about animals, or the ones about stars, or the ones I could understand. And there were plenty in that I couldn't understand, obviously. But I had that interest, and I remember the first thing learning at school was the daffodils and the trout and the classics, and I remember learning by heart. But nobody ever kind of encouraged me, and certainly at grammar school, I was just a working class oik, I just didn't get any of it at all, So I never pursued it. When I went to university, I realised I had an interest in Dylan Thomas, had a great interest in Dylan Thomas. I'd seen a play of his on television.
And Dylan Thomas is a Welsh poet, isn't he?
He was the wild man of Welsh poetry during and after the war, and he died in his 30s of drink in New York on one of his tours of New York.
Right.
But he was the wild man. But he was also a very crafted poet.
Yeah.
But I was as interested in his life as his poetry, because some of that I didn't quite understand, and I was too naive to understand it. But I got his storyline because he'd written autobiographical things about how he came to that point, how he left home. He was a great short story writer, and he was a great recorder of them for the BBC.
Okay.
He probably a career you couldn't copy today, because he just went from school, got on a train, went to London, got a job at the BBC, and ended up writing poetry and short stories for them.
Yeah, which sometimes that's how the BBC worked back then, didn't it?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah. So Dylan Thomas was a great influence, and I went to Swansea, which is where Dylan Thomas came from. So I was back reading stuff and acquiring, but in a very haphazard way. I mean, I still knew nothing about the classics or anything like that, but I knew what I liked, and I liked some of the American stuff I picked up en route, because I was a voracious reader of all kinds of odds and sods of things.
Well, I've just come in the room now. I can see loads of Jack Kerouac.
Yes, yeah. Jack Kerouac had an impression on me at Swansea because it is actually on the coast, obviously, and it's a beautiful bay.
Yeah.
And around the corner on the Gower, people do surfing.
Right.
And this is in the 60s, so they're all very surf. Well, not suggesting for a minute that I did any surfing, but there was that kind of just pre-hippie culture. It was very much a surfing kind of culture among certain students, and of course there was an affinity with not so obviously the New York Jack Kerouac, but with the Californian stuff of Jack Kerouac, and his West Coast experiences. and I picked it up because a poet at Swansea, a revered, very young poet, died in the bay one night, canoeing with a guy who was also a student, but he was a boxer, an older student, and it was so romanticised. They both paddled out into the bay, and were drowned.
An accident. Who knows?
Well, it happened.
Happened.
Whatever happened, it happened. And it stuck with me because this lad, I'd already organised a poetry event there without any credentials, without even hardly a poem to my name. When I went around all the societies at Swansea, when you're Freshers Week, to sign up, I thought, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I don't like the sound of them. I don't like that. I'll set my own up. So I set up something called Morgue Sock.
Yeah.
And Morgue Sock was a poetry society.
Right.
And three of my mates who I met in the first week there.
Morgue Sock?
Yeah.
As in...
Everything is sock, and it, sort of soccer sock or history sock.
Oh, right, okay.
So I thought, well, we'll call this Morgue Sock. And Morgue Sock then acquired a dozen people who decided they would join Morgue Sock rather than the hockey sock or whatever. And within a year, we'd organised a poetry event.
Right.
And all that we had was, I think I had one poem, a couple of the other lads had a couple of poems each. But
can you remember that poem? What it was roughly about?
No,
the title?
It was very embarrassing. It was probably something to do with a woman who'd just thrown me over in the first term. I wouldn't want to remember it now.
So just relationships, basically.
Yeah. But I do remember a friend from Somerset coming up with a very wordy masterpiece called The Wanderer of Kerouac. It's a bit of a biblical thing.
Yeah.
I thought, Jesus, I'm in company here. But then other people came in, including this lad who was drowned. They came in and did some proper stuff and made me feel embarrassed. And Asoka Weerasingam, who was a Sinhalese poet, engineer, he was an engineering student, mature engineering student, came in and he treated me like a poet.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have any kind of preconceptions or anything. And I thought, I'm just a fraud. I'm a fraud. I don't know anything. I don't know. I'm not doing literature. I don't know anything about English. I don't know what an iambic pentameter is. What do I know?
Yeah.
The answer was nothing. But that was my first foray.
He treated you as an equal.
Yeah. So I carried on reading all this stuff, and then my first job after that was in Oxford. And I was teaching business studies and teaching a lot of school link courses because nobody else would,
Yeah.
All the scallies of the day,
Yeah.
Because since I was from the north, somehow I'd be able to cope with it or put up with it or whatever. But I worked with three people who had a profound influence on me, who treated me seriously, even though I had no pedigree or anything. I ended up writing a book on China with one of them,
right?
And a number of other books
about history of China.
Yeah, that sort of stuff that's on.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
Arthur Cottrell was a co-worker of mine, and Phil Garner, who was an English graduate from Oxford who worked in the college, and he was from Liverpool, so he knew him.
Yeah,
he'd had him down the previous year to before Brian Patton had come to the college and that. So we started doing bits and pieces there, and they never scoffed at my efforts, put it that way.
Yeah.
And but when I left there, and we split up and went our different ways, and I left there and came up north, I sat on it.
Right.
I thought I was coming to work in the education department, a suit and tie job.
Yeah.
I'd not worn a tie for 6 years.
Right.
I could. I'm coming from Stoke. I can wear a suit. I could wear a suit and tie if I wanted to. Proper suit, which I worked in the holidays to pay for and all that stuff. I came up here. I thought they're not interested in my interest. They want somebody who's going to push paper around and sack people and all that, So I kept quiet. In fact, the very first week I was here, as I was despairing at what I'd done, leaving this fantastic job and a fantastic college, which was just about to change for the worse, I have to say. Principal had just retired, and he was a great supporter of anything liberal. He was a fantastic character. Have a cigar, Mr. Morgan. Would you like a sherry? Come in, sit down. He liked his young members of staff. He really cultivated his young members of staff. Let us get away with murder. Backed us on all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I came up here. The colleges were like factories.
Right.
And I thought, you'd better shut your mouth and get your head down. I went into the big library in town the very first week.
And roughly when are we talking here?
It was 76.
Okay, right.
And I went, first of all, I went looking for friends, Henry Miller,
Yeah.
Jack Kerouac, they were there.
Yeah.
At least there was something of them there.
There was.
They felt, phew, thank God it's got this far north,
And it's managed to travel this, they've got them here.
And then I saw this magnificent compendium of American poets.
Okay.
1,000 American poets. And it opened itself on a page and it said, Tim Reynolds. And I'd met Tim Reynolds in Oxford.
Right.
In a particularly weird way. He was an ex-American professor of classics who'd been working in Texas at Austin, University of Austin. He'd packed it all in. He'd come to England. He was translating the Confucian Analects. He switched from Greek to Chinese.
Right, okay.
He was probably in his late 30s, 40s, but he'd met Jack Kerouac.
Wow.
He was working in a pub in Oxford. I was introduced to him by a lad who lived in the same village as I was living at the time. And he said, "You want to come and meet this fellow? He's really interesting. He's American. He's done this. He writes, And Tim Reynolds was another person who just took me at face value.
Yeah.
He didn't care. He looked at some of my stuff that I started writing there, and he said, "Very English." I think the most scathing comment he made is, "Oh, that's very English."
That was so. He was a working academic, but still writing his poetry.
He was living in a little garret down Turl Street. Really just one little room with a ring for the kettle, and toilet at the end of the corridor. And he worked in the pub, and he was doing this particular translation.
But he was from Texas originally. Yeah. But he'd met Jack Kerouac, had he spoken about what it was like when he'd spoken to Jack Kerouac?
Well, he had that authenticity anyway. It was his interest in China. I only got interested in China through working with Arthur Cottrell, this other chap who influenced me there, because Arthur was married to a Chinese woman.
Right, okay.
And Arthur was determined to make a career in writing, and there's many books on there by him. He's written many books about the East. But he'd written a couple of academic, sort of college-y type books, and then he said, "I'm going to write a book on China." He said, this is when China was in black and white, this Maoist days.
Sure, right.
He said, "Nobody knows anything about China, and it's all this preconception, it's all stereotypes, it's all that." And he had been feeding me bits about Chinese history and Chinese poetry and Chinese this and that. He said, "How do you fancy it?" I said, "Arthur, I don't know anything about China." He said, "You're perfect." He said, "You're just like everybody else out there. You're ideal. You can write for other people who don't know anything about China."
Okay.
So for 2 years we went to all the big libraries, did all this, that, we put our piece together. He sold it basically to...
So of course this is pre-internet, so this is how traditionally research, you go to a library and index...
He wrote the letter to the editor at Harrop, as it was then, one of the biggest companies. And he did the sell. Yeah. He did the pitch, if you like. They took it up. There wasn't a kind of populist book on Chinese history.
Okay, and this was a sort of then an up-to-date telling of Chinese history. Yeah. So and this got you. So you're writing then. And you're continuing to develop your poetry as well, and continue writing poetry. And so so fast forward, sort of like well, as in because you're developing your style then. Did you feel your style... Because you've spoken to Tim Reynolds, you've had all these people...
No, I still felt a fraud. I hadn't found my voice.
Because you keep... So I think you've got some great poetry and you keep saying I'm a fraud, but...
Well, I found my voice later.
Right.
I didn't... I think for my kind of poetry, narrative poetry, you have to think of what it sounds like.
Right.
And that's the great thing about standing up and doing it and thinking that's a bit lopsided, that doesn't quite work, It's not about working to a metre, but it's about testing it out in practice.
Yeah, sure.
And so I didn't find my voice for much longer. And I was terrified. I was very diffident. I was very diffident unless I was pissed, And then I was a complete twat.
But that was. Do you think that was to do with again this acceptance for one to be on a poetry circuit, but because your writing was so new, and all writers and myself and whoever, we all feel vulnerable, don't we?
Yeah. I did still feel a fraud, except in writing a book about China, I did do the bits that I was asked to do, which was like technology and the geography and so specific aspects that Arthur would do, the arts and politics, and so we fused our stuff. He fused it beautifully, and it came out in 1975, just before I left Oxford, and just before Mao died, so it completely invalidated it. You know, our last chapter was a complete hagiography of Mao Zedong, you know, who died the year after.
And this was a book that was then available in any bookshop, or was it in academia?
No, it was designed for the general reader.
And how did it do? Can you imagine? Did it do very well?
It did something like 10,000 hardback, which wasn't a lot in those days. It'd be a lot these days. About 25,000 paperback and about 20,000 paperback in the States.
And what was the name of the book?
China, an Integrated Study.
There we go.
It's in there somewhere.
It's okay. Well, so and I'm sure people can track that.
Well, that's what in my work there are threads about Chinese.
Okay.
Hence the title of that.
Yes, yeah. Tell me about that in a minute, because that's interesting. Right. Okay. So that's interesting. I love the fact when the guy said to you, he said, do you know anything about China? And you said, absolutely nothing. He goes, you're ideal. And it was a bit like a sponge soaking up. So I see, this is
complete fluke. I mean, the point is, this is the way in which life treats you well for some reason that you cannot explain. I just met some fabulous people in my time who just put me on a different set of rails.
And this is the wonderful thing about this podcast. And I've spoken to so many people, and I was speaking to someone yesterday who dropped that they'd toured Italy doing a show, and I was like, hang on a minute, and then I have never realised you've published a book on China back in the 70s, which sold 25,000 copies. I wouldn't have known that. That's an amazing achievement. With the poetry. So Write Out Loud, you started the Write Out Loud to sort of encourage other people to
Yes, fast forward, we wanted
Sorry,
to... It's okay, no, I could be here all day.
I know, I feel a special coming on here, because it's like, I'm saying half an hour, listen, it's fascinating. Well, okay, so what actually, let's go back to the 70s. What happened, so once you'd published the book, what happened then?
Well, I had a choice, I felt. I felt... I was so interested in the whole thing. I felt either I go into China in some way, you know, and in other words, I'd perhaps do a postgraduate thing, and I just couldn't afford it, you know. It was very expensive living in Oxford with two small kids. And so that wasn't really a goer. But in a sense, that would have been a natural thing. I knew it would have been my had I got on Mastermind, it would have been my specialist subject, because I did know a lot, and I felt I understood a lot. Yeah. Because Arthur not bothered about detail, although it was very detailed, but it wasn't about the detail. It was about understanding the patterns. China is built on long-term patterns, recurring cycles, and long-standing rituals and traditions that don't disappear completely. Whatever happens, they remain. So I felt I'd got a good feel for it, but I hadn't been to China. I didn't speak Chinese, and so I haven't got any academic credentials. Yeah. Arthur went off and wrote lots of books about China, because he had his wife, and he lived in the Far East, and he went off and did that. We still worked on a few things, even though we weren't working together, but they were mainly educational texts for different categories of kids and in colleges. So we stayed in touch a long time and did joint projects together. But the China stuff went on hold. I came up to Bolton and sat on it. I didn't tell anybody I'd written a book on China. It was not relevant to working here, and I never really made much of it until I only survived Bolton for 2 years. And I'll just wind back again. So Tim Reynolds really reinforced this thing with his Confucian Analects thing, and that was quite different. He had nothing to do with Arthur Arthur was very suspicious of him.
Right.
The fact that he was. I said, does he speak Chinese? And no, he's just translating it from
But by chance, that was his chosen Confucius, who was a Chinese philosopher. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, he was the fountainhead in a way of Chinese
thought. And so he was doing interpretations of his writings or translations. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. There are many stories about Tim Reynolds that would just take us off on another line, but because I kept in touch with Tim for a few years.
Well, let's talk because this is someone that, by connection, and you're getting into your poetry. So he's known Jack Kerouac. So you're chatting to him, and what was he talking to you about your poetry, and in general, what would you talk about?
Tim was a teacher,
right?
So he was happy to share things. He was also an everyday folk. He was very happy to come up. We lived in North Oxfordshire, which is about as close to Oxford as I could afford to live, just outside Banbury, and he'd come up and just play with the kids and have a joint, and he was very kind of laid back character. He could do nothing, but he wasn't an intense character at all. He was very laid back.
And was he still writing poetry?
Yes, he was.
He was.
I remember going to. He was always understandably broke. He said, "I've got this gig in one of the pubs in Bolton. It's for the Oxford University Poetry Society."
Right.
He said, "Come along." I thought, "What's the evening?" I had to get back. I persuaded my missus to give me a pass out to stay in Oxford overnight.
Okay.
I had no money or anything, so we went along, and they were the biggest bunch of buffoons imaginable, at least to me.
Right.
Maybe.
And these are Oxford students.
Yeah.
Right.
So they had their poetry society.
Yeah.
He was the guest reader. I was just a passenger. They were absolute. The chair insisted on reading the entire Taybridge Disaster by William McGonagall in a mock Scottish accent.
Right, oh dear.
And I thought, this is getting off ground. I was much of an inverted snob in those days. I really fucking loathed it.
Yeah.
And Tim got stuff out, and he started reading stuff about Indians and Eskimos and folklore and this and that and things he was interested in. A bit like Gary Snyder, his interest in the natural world and that in his own poetry.
And Gary Snyder, he's another American
poet. Yeah, he's
poet.
Another West Coast poet,
Okay,
another one of that kind of West Coast beats. I'm a great admirer of his poetry, Gary Snyder, yeah. So he did it, and they paid him. And I said, Tim, how can you bear it? How can you prostitute yourself like this?
Yeah.
And he said, Dave, he said, Confucius said, a gentleman does not opine.
Okay, nice. That's a good.
He took the £10 or whatever, and off we went round his pub to drink it.
Right. Okay.
I slept on his floor that night, but he was just a mentor.
Yes,
he was a mentor.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in it for him except I was interested, and I was a sponge, as you say. Yeah. He went to visit his. This is a side issue. He went to visit his brother in Japan. He was a dentist in Japan. And of course, Japan was full of Americans because he'd been there since the war. It was an Americanized place, basically. And they did baseball and all that. And his brother was a dentist. So he went overland by the Trans-Siberian Express because he thought it'd be an experience and cheaper than flying.
So that's the Russian, right across Russia on a train.
Yeah.
He wouldn't fly
because
he couldn't afford it.
Yeah, so I think that was his argument, and he thought he might see more, but he took his manuscript with him to work on.
Right.
He got to Dover. I think he was picking the train up in Paris. He got to Dover, got drinking with some bikers, left his manuscript there, and of course had to proceed. He left it on the boat.
No.
And
what was the manuscript?
This was his entire translation of the Analects of Confucius.
No way.
And I didn't see him for about 2 years. And I heard he was back in town just as I was leaving Oxford. And I got in touch with him somehow. And we met up. It was great. And I said, he told me this story, and he said, but you'll never believe it. When I came back, I went to the Lost Property Office at Dover, and it was there.
No, unbelievable.
2 years later.
I wonder what Confucius would say about that. Has he got any Or if you ever lose something, one must always search lost property.
don't give
Really, it was in lost property. Yeah. That is unbelievable. So he'd been to see his brother in Japan, and in all that time.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So that was so Tim was obviously an influence.
And then I came north, and I almost severed my past. I severed it all. I'm not much for living in the past, particularly.
Yeah.
I had to get on with living here, trying to create some new life. It was loathsome in many ways, but I did learn a lot very quickly. The responsibility that you had working in education department, it was immense. But those friends were in the library. And that's the point. I opened the book of 1,000 American poets, and who would be there facing it? Tim Reynolds.
There he was.
Thought there is something. There is something looking after me. There is somebody with an eye on me. And 2 years later, 2.5 years later, I went to Knowsley in Merseyside, Kirby Heighton, where I immediately felt at home more than Bolton.
Yeah.
Very rough and ready, but very art on sleeve and very, very in your face, and I just loved it. It's as long as you got things, as long as you're effective, you can get away with all sorts.
Yeah.
Bankrupt, but I always had budgets because I always worked with unemployed people and always had money to do stuff.
Yeah.
So I was there quite a long time, but I worked for a bloke who ran summer holiday camps. He'd started with people in Kirby when he worked for Lancashire, and he used to take families away on camps. He thought, why can't these families go away? So we'll go somewhere and set up tents, and then we'll have games and all that sort of stuff. But he then moved, because he lived in Southport, he got Pontins to take it on.
Right.
So that at Easter and in September, when they opened and closed, for a whole week he'd do family leisure things.
Yeah.
And he'd fill it with thousands of people from all over the country.
And this was people on low incomes, is that all?
Well, it got to be anybody.
Anybody,
because for a week, if you were prepared to go when it was just opening up, and it kind of warmed the place up. And he was doing it in Prestatyn, in Southport, in Brixham, on the south coast at Camber Sands. And so he said, would you like to do something? And he used to employ I don't know, he was working for the council, but he was running this business on the side. It was immense.
Yeah.
Would you like to do something that's free? You can take your family, I'll pay you for delivering whatever you do. What would you like to do? I've got no practical skills. He said, I'll do you, in the week, I'll do a course on China.
Right, okay.
I'll do 2 hours a day. So one day we'll translate a Chinese poem. I'll give them all the pictograms and the ideograms and see what you can make of it. There's the Chinese. What do you think it means? And another day we'll talk about, and the 5th day we'll talk about food.
Right.
Because through Arthur's wife, I'd actually been very intrigued at how she made food and what food she made. And I started messing about myself, much to his amusement, but because he didn't see me as a cook. But I did this course. This is about 81, probably 1980, 81. And he said at the end of it, he said, I don't want to use that course again. Can you just do the cooking?
Right.
And can you do it 5 days?
And this is in a holiday camp?
Yeah.
Right.
So for the next 10 years, off and on, I was teaching Chinese cooking.
Right.
Either in
a holiday camp?
Preston or Brixham, particularly in Devon, or Camber Sands, for a whole week. 2 sessions a day sometimes, because there's an enormous demand. You couldn't buy any Chinese ingredients in supermarkets.
Of course.
Even garlic and ginger, you couldn't.
It's just foreign.
So I used to buy everything from Manchester,
right,
or Liverpool, and he let me buy all the stuff I said I needed. So it lasted me the whole year. I came back, I had a year's supply of.
Because each city does tend to have obviously a Chinese community. Would you go to the Chinese community to buy the ingredients?
And I knew from eating many meals with Arthur what I was looking for, and I worked out things you could do on a camping stove in a chalet in front of 20 people who were squeezed in without killing them. It went. I developed my Chinese cooking skills through just doing it day after day, intensively live, like the Galloping Gourmet. Before your eyes. Here's a carrot. There's nothing prepared. Do it all in 2 hours. 3-course meal. Start off with a cup of Chinese tea and all that stuff. And these are people who, one or two people knew something about it, but a lot of people didn't.
Yeah.
They knew what takeaway was. They knew what fried rice was, and they knew they couldn't cook fried rice, and they couldn't work out how you cook fried rice.
Yeah,
so, so you could meet their needs very easily.
Yeah.
Occasionally, somebody would say, "You're not a chef, are you? I can tell by the way you're almost cutting your fingers off."
Yeah.
So you get a chef in, or you get somebody who's been to China, or something. Do you speak Chinese? And so I was always conscious about my shortcomings, or my limitations, but I was very honest about them.
Yes.
And I know that the secretary of the guy who opened the first Chinese restaurant in London after the war, I didn't know she was his secretary. She was an elderly lady.
Yeah.
Came along. She said, that was she was very erudite. She was posh. She was very, very interesting. She said, I've worked for Mr. Lowe for 30 years. And I didn't know that's what they did.
Right, and Mr. Lowe was
Kenneth Lowe was the kind of guru who opened the first Chinese restaurant in London.
Oh,
so
really?
after the war, yeah.
So you were celebrity chef at a point before anyone.
Well, I think so, yeah. Because I know I did it, and I know I did a lot of it, and I know that I bought all the stuff home, so I had all the equipment. So I used to cook a lot of banquet. No, I could do a banquet for people, like 15 courses. Might not be all haute couture in Chinese terms, but I could bash it out. It'd take all day and that. But,
sure. But Ken Hom was popular. I remember.
Ken Hom came along later. It never impressed me. I'd already done all that stuff.
Really, you'd already said, right, okay.
Yeah.
So there you were. Your fingers right on the pulse there, because. This and there was a massive emergence early 80s of Chinese cooking. So this was another. So I'm here to talk about poetry, but I've got Chinese published books about China. Then you're a Chinese chef at a holiday camp. Then you meet a big American poet, which you're chatting to at the Oxford Union. So anything else that you want to get off your chest, Dave, that I didn't know?
I told you I'd wander off.
No, that's fine. I want you to wander.
It's a great pleasure being offered the chance to, because I've always tried to keep my backstory back. More concerned with what we need to do today.
It's
what's
fine.
Going on today.
Honestly, I'm gonna get someone else in a minute. It'll be sort of like. But let's I bet we'll get onto something else.
Go back to Tony Walsh and that.
That's because that's kind of where we started, and then we. But Write Out Loud, and or before that, or Tony Walsh had sort of was kind of inspired you, or got you going. You'd started writing poetry, and Write Out Loud is developed, and all those gigs now. But short stories, because that when did you start getting into short? And we'll talk about your book as well, because you went to America, and that I'd love to just chat to you about. So when did you start writing short stories, and how did that come about?
Because everyone's got stories in their head, like most people have got poems in their head, in a sense to realise, to recognise it. But I suppose everyone wants to write autobiographical stuff in some way, or at least I did. I was very influenced by Dylan Thomas's short stories, and in fact loads of books of short stories there. I mean, the short story format, apart from being very economical, there's something about it that just very attractive to me. So I didn't know what to do with them. I'd found a way of what to do with the poems I was writing, because we could trot around, say, from Lancaster to Liverpool, from Oldham to Southport. We knew the scene, we knew where to go. I had an 8-seater bus, and Write Out Loud would go and double the numbers at some local poetry venues. Actually, we had 3 nights a week, just going to poetry gigs and having a good laugh and listening to what other people were doing. Anyway, the short stories hadn't got an avenue really, and I had no formal training in it, but by another strange twist of fate, I ended up teaching creative writing at Warrington College about 2008. Complete fluke. I had no credentials for it. I even ended up teaching GCSE English that year there, because the teacher dropped out, and I knew they were in a pickle. Yeah. And they asked me if I'd fill in. I had no qualification whatsoever for teaching GCSE English, but I did it.
It's what you know. And
I
if
was
you're
a teacher. I've been a teacher, so.
And you've written a book. You've done all these writing.
So it was good for me. Anyway, I think in teaching the course, the creative writing course, obviously I started reading more purposefully a lot of short stories to use to get material for the course, and so having set these people who kept turning up to attend the courses exercises, I thought I'd better do it myself,
Yeah.
And so I did. I set myself a target 2 or 3 years ago of writing a story every month. I thought I'll have 12 at the end of the year, and that's almost a collection.
Right, okay.
I lasted about 3. But bit by bit I've kept going back to it and doing bits, and 3 years ago, 2016 I think it was, as I was deciding to go to Lowell for the Jack Kerouac annual commemoration.
Right. And this is where he was from America?
This is where he was brought up, in
Lowell in
Massachusetts.
Okay.
Yeah. Somebody from Lowell sent me a link to an Italian literary competition.
Right.
And there were openings for things in English in both short story form and poetry.
Yeah.
So in parallel with getting myself organised to go there, I sent off these things at very much last minute. You have to send $30 or whatever or 30 something stuff to euros, I suppose, off to Italy, and sent a poem I got about Jack Kerouac, because that was the thing. Their theme that year was Jack Kerouac for some reason. They picked a poet a year, and the theme on the short story was anything. So I sent my Jack Kerouac poem, and I sent a short story, which was really about me living in Oxford and having an affair with a co-worker, but it was concealed around lots of other things. So I sent that, and I won a prize. I won 2 prizes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you sent this off, and then you get a letter in the post. Yeah. You've won.
Would you like to come to Italy to collect your prize at your own expense?
Right. Okay.
But that meant that by the time I went to Lowell in October,
and you'd won another prize to go to America.
No, I just funded that myself.
Okay.
I just one of those things. I thought I can't keep putting this off.
No, well, I'm
going to go. But I was able to go.
Yeah.
Having had a short story published, and the Jack Kerouac poem,
and this is his birthplace as well. Yeah.
And that's where this comes in.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So this was, and we're chatting, sitting here now, so I can see the Chinese lantern behind you. Yeah. So it's like everything now. As I look around, things are starting to connect. So the penny drop, and I saw this as well, and this is. So tell us about this book and how it came about.
When I decided I was going to Lowell, I decided I couldn't take my uncontrolled sheaf of papers and poems that were all dog-eared and marked up and all that, and I thought it just won't be very professional, so I thought I must put them into a booklet.
Right.
And we'd had 1 or 2 anthologies. We'd created 2 anthologies then for another organisation we set up called Live from Worktown, which is Bolton being Worktown.
Right.
And Paul Needs of Flapjack Press had actually produced the anthologies for us.
Okay.
Very professionally. Excellent stuff. So I said to Paul, can you knock me out a pamphlet, basically, a chapbook? It doesn't have to be under your imprint, but can you just do it and make sure it's really good, or at least really spelt right?
Yeah, right.
And he took it on. He said, I'll publish it. He said I really like it, so I'll put it in my imprint.
Wow.
And so I went to Lowell armed with the book.
So this and this is a collection of poems.
Yeah.
So how many poems roughly in this?
I think it's about 30 possibly.
30 and it's the title is, and you're going to say it because I'm going to make them.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I wish I'd just called it, an anthology of poems or 30 poems, but I called it Chuangtze's Caterpillar. Chuangtze was a post-Confucian philosopher in China, and this famous story attached to him was that he woke up having dreamt that he was a butterfly, and his conjecture was he in fact a butterfly dreaming that he was a man?
Okay.
And he built up a whole thing about reality and illusion around this, and whether this thing is real, and very, very philosophical stuff, you know.
That's not connected with the butterfly effect, is it? Or that's something?
No.
That's
That thing about monsoons and things.
Oh, right, okay.
No, it's just that thing about is it for real? You know, what is real?
Right.
And I'd learned about Chuang-Tzu through Arthur Cottrell, obviously.
Okay,
I'd never heard of him. If I hadn't met Arthur, I'd never heard of Chuang-Tzu. Now, the thing about Chuang-Tzu's caterpillar, I thought I hadn't got a title for the book, and I had to write a couple of more modern poems that I hadn't been touting around to fit in. I just wanted something to finish it off. And I wanted the book to be about impermanence and change and to have a theme. And I don't know why, I suddenly revisited this idea of not so much about Chuang-Tzu's caterpillar, but what about Chuang-Tzu's butterfly? What about Chuang-Tzu's caterpillar?
Yeah.
Does the caterpillar have any notion of what's coming next?
Yeah, right.
You know, does it have any notion of and when it's a butterfly, does it have any notion of what it's been?
Yeah.
And so I encapsulated that in 3 lines, really.
Okay. Go on, read.
Well, it's the final poem in the book, and I suppose it's very pretentious, really, but I just allowed myself a bit of pretentiousness in my old age.
You're allowed, please.
It says, one of these days, I'll just cocoon myself in silk and sleep, 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 dream, dream, dream. And that's it, really.
That's
and
wonderful.
The question is whether the caterpillar is. That's it. I'm just, I've done my bit now.
You've done that, but it's interpretation, isn't it? And I think with and that's really interesting. I'll probably go away now, and I'll have to Google that. And this could take me all weekend to now try and get my head round.
Yeah.
So you went over to America, and this is in Lowell, in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So did you get to read some of the poems?
Yes.
And how did it go? Tell us.
Well, it was really good. I'd let the organisers know that I was coming, but I mean, I was nobody. But then I'd just had this poem published in this Italian thing that they were connected to. So I had a message from Italy to take to them, and this, that, and the other. And I could read my poem "Go Jack Go," which is a very jazzy type poem.
And that's about Jack Kerouac.
And I was able to read it with David Amram, who David Amram is a world famous composer in his 80s. He wrote the music for Manchurian Candidate and a lot of 60s, 70s, 80s films. Top world class musician. But he also wrote, he was around in the 50s with the New York Beats.
Right.
And he wrote the score for Pull My Daisy, which is a really beaty, freaky little film written by Jack Kerouac about the Beats. It's really grainy, black and whitey, but he did the score for it.
Wow.
And so I'd met David. He'd come over to Manchester as part of a British tour a few months before that.
Yeah.
And Scott Devener, a good mate
Scott's
of mine,
another great,
and he'd been my lodger for 3 years. He said, David Amram's coming, I'm involved with it. You know, there's only 50 places, it's a small venue, great jazz backing.
Wow.
Really great night. That man was 80 odd. He played for 3 hours and talked, reminisced for 3 hours. Fantastic.
Wow.
And he was still there signing autographs when we left at 12. You know, he was really a beautiful man.
Yeah.
He's a lovely fella. Anyway, that was I was able to jam Go Jack Go with him playing piano.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
That was brilliant. So he backed you as you read out your poem.
I'd done some stuff with
That's brilliant.
James Hartnell, who's a guitarist, and Kevin Bates, who plays sax and flute and guitar. We had done some stuff for Marsden Jazz Festival the year before, because Julian Jordan lives in Marsden now, so he's run poetry from Marsden for a while, and he got involved with the Jazz Festival, and he persuaded to put on an event to do beat poetry. So we got a kind of headline slot, 20 minutes, and I wrote 3 new pieces and plus the Jack Kerouac thing, and we put them to music using standard jazz tunes, particularly. And so we'd already performed Go Jack Go at the Marsden Jazz Festival. And we've done stuff. If you go on YouTube, you'll find myself and Kevin Bates doing haikus to flute and sax and other stuff.
So if anybody were to Dave Morgan look on YouTube, there's a lot of live stuff that comes up.
And jazz, poetry, any of those links. Yeah.
Wow, that's okay. So
suddenly I was realising something else there. I didn't know how I would. Actually, I tried to learn the guitar, as you can see, and singularly, unsuccessfully, I think. Always try to find some way of representing myself musically. Yeah. I used to be in choirs when I was a kid, but I let that go. But doing the jazz stuff really has given me an in.
And also when you were doing and you're up there and you're doing Go Jack Go. Yeah. In those nights and those evenings, and I find sometimes, does that inspire you to write more? Do you get ideas that come into your head when you get off stage going, oh, I know, I'll do a poem?
No. No, but if somebody said, can you do a different set around something else? I know I have stuff in there. If I chuck other stuff overboard, ditch other stuff, I know I can write others. I can write for a purpose, or I can write for a theme, and that doesn't bother me when I'm not writing, because I feel, well, if I need to, I will. If I want to, I will. But we do so many other things. We're so interested in trying to revive culture in Bolton Town Centre through a programme of jazz that we've organised over the last couple of years. And through trying to create live venues for classic cabaret things. Not entirely 100% successfully, but we tried. We've tried. Last year we had a big festival celebrating, in fact this year, ran for 9 months, celebrating Bill Norton. It was certain to do with music, but Bill Norton is Bolton's most successful writer, but nobody's heard of him.
And to my shame, I've not. But Bill Norton, what's he written?
Well, you know the film Alfie? Michael Caine. Bill Norton wrote that.
Okay, right.
Spring and Port Wine, Family Way, which were 70s classic films. He wrote them.
Right. Okay.
And they're all based on his own experience. He lived in Bolton from the age of 4 to the age of 30. He was a coal man when he left. He went to London to drive during the war, and he was a pacifist, so he drove lorries during the war. And while he was in London, he saw a short story in one of the Standard or something. Thought I could do better than that. Did so, got it published, earned 3 weeks' wages from it. Carried on doing that. By 1950, he stayed in London then, didn't really come back to Bolton. He had 3 plays in the West End. He was writing plays for the BBC. He was this, that and the other. Then he got the films. Then
and he had just gone, I can do better than that, and that was it.
So we've had a whole 9 months of stuff around showing the films, having a shop for 5 months, with lots of stuff about the 30s of Bolton and lots of stuff about his history.
Sure.
He came over as an immigrant at 4 from Ireland, terraced house, top end of Bolton.
Yeah, right, okay. So is he passed away now?
He died. It was 25 years since he died. That's why we got a Heritage Lottery grant to really big it up, and we did. We had 2,000 visitors to the shop over the time.
And I think everybody's aware of the film Alfie, and it's.
There's a younger generation who are not, strangely enough. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll and encourage people through this podcast to go. And there's so many hashtags for this podcast, Dave. That it's going to go off the page. It's incredible. So, and just to say, this your book is available on Is it Flapjack Press?
It is Flapjack, yes.
Which I do know, and it's flapjackpress.co.uk.
Yeah.
So it's available to go and buy, and listen, and I'm sure we're gonna have to come back and do another special. I think there's a whole Jack Kerouac special here.
Yes, but I haven't even mentioned Richard McFarlane, Elvis Presley, who in fact, I don't know why I missed him out, because in Bolton, the one person who did encourage me, even though he said he didn't understand what I was doing or where it would fit in with anything, was Richard.
And who was known as Hovis Presley, and he's just very, very sadly died.
He died in 2005 after getting some viral thing, and it was very badly handled by the authorities, and he lost consciousness and died in hospital at the age of under 50. So what I did after that was write a play about him using his material.
Right.
And we took that to Royal Exchange Studio. We took it all around the Northwest.
Wonderful. What was that called?
Hovis in Wonderland.
Oh, wonderful. I wish I'd been around to see that.
Well, there's a copy of the studio recording of it there.
Oh,
for
wonderful.
You.
So again, is that can it be found on YouTube? Or
the whole thing? No, but somewhere there's a YouTube of a recording made at the Royal Exchange on the night we were on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can't hear most. It's done as a reading rather than a performed piece, like a radio play.
Yeah.
Because we're not actors, so it was done that way, and you can't hear much of it because the audience is laughing so much.
Right. Okay. And it
hysterically in some cases.
And was it about? And was it written about? Obviously about his life, but dropping in his poems.
It took that his work is mainly collected in something called Poetic Off License, and the first edition of that was in the mid-90s, a very small pocket version. Then he did it when he went to the Edinburgh Festival, where he was tipped for the Perrier.
Yeah.
In the 90s, and he walked out. So
there's
a whole story around that.
Oh, right, okay.
And he had a sort of updated version for that.
Right.
But that had all sold out, they'd all gone. And when he died, after a couple of years, and I'd spoken to his family about doing this play based on his poems and trying to create an arc of a year from January to December, of a year in the life of, and then a day in the life of.
Right, okay.
So the two halves are around that theme, using a lot of 65-70% of it Richard's stuff, 30% of mine, linking and filling stuff.
Yeah.
And so that all worked out fine. I've missed my thread now because I was heading towards a certain point then.
The play about Hovis, and it was
we put it into the Royal Exchange competition for new plays, and we got in, and it was a riot.
Wonderful.
It was really good.
I think I remember from listening to John Shuttleworth, 94, when John Shuttleworth was massive, who was a character comedian, or is a character by Graham Fellows, and Hovis. That was the first time I'd heard Hovis, and Hovis was supporting him or doing a little bit in between. Yeah. And he's phenomenal. And I say to anybody, just go and Google Hovis.
There's stuff
Presley.
There's YouTube stuff, but I was saying that the actual recording of that night it's not much use really, because you can't actually hear what's being said. But we've got a CD there which you can take a copy of.
I think there's probably a whole special on remembering Hovis from all the poets around, because I think everybody knew him at some point, and he was a great influence. So, so listen, thank you for today, Dave. But I think we're gonna have to come back and do another. There's 14 different specials just on again the wealth of knowledge you have on Jack Kerouac. I'll be really interested in speaking more into. But it's been wonderful today to chat to you.
Very self-indulgent.
No, not at all. Because I want people to hear. As I said, it's this is stuff people just don't hear about, and I think it's important. And especially when I moved up to Manchester. And that was something that did when I was doing the comedy. There was loads of poets, and this is why I want to do this. And no doubt I'll be in touch about coming back again, and we'll have to talk more about Jack Kerouac. But listen, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show and sharing all your stories.
No, I'm very privileged. It's very cathartic. Thank you.
You've been listening to Funny Peculiar. Tune in next week. More great guests.